All right, good. Here we go. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, November 21, 2017 meeting of the Edina City Council. Roll call, please, Ms. Mangan. Yes, Ms. Mangan, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be back. Member Brindle.
Here.
Member Fisher.
Here.
Member Staunton.
Here.
Member Stewart.
Here.
Mayor Heflin.
Here. We have a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening. Manager Neal, anything you wanted to modify on the agenda?
No, sir.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as shown.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the agenda as shown. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. Community comment. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the council on a matter of concern to them that's not otherwise on the agenda this evening? Yes, sir. Good evening.
My name is Frank Lorenz, 7151 York Avenue South, Unit 720. My comments are regarding Edina's management of trees within the city limits. Since I don't have any college-level training in either entomology or forestry, I'm going to defer to your forester. It's my understanding that the Edina employs a full-time, 12-month-a-year forester, and also you have a full-time person who supposedly oversees tear-downs and rebuilds of standalone housing units in the city. The entire metro area has a problem with emerald ash borer, which is an insect that kills ash trees. And they were first found a number of years ago in St. Paul. I'm told that the wind has spread them as far southwest as Eden Prairie, which implies that these insects are in Edina as well. The Minneapolis Park Board, which is separate from the city of Minneapolis, has taken a fairly questionable policy of cutting down all the ash trees on the park board property, which is the parks and the parkways, and they're going to chip those trees and bury them. That's the most expensive way to do it, which I assume is their objective. But in any event, if the city here has to remove infected ash trees, I would suggest that you consider having a firm in South Minneapolis called Wood from the Hood, or Woods from the Hood. Either make those trees into dimensional lumber in their plant, or make them into wooden furniture, which will mean that the carbon that's captured in the tree limbs doesn't go back up into the atmosphere, which it would if the trees are burned. The problem with that is it may be expensive to move the trees out of the place where you have to cut them down. Along those same lines, and I'm running out of time, but if there's a tear down and rebuild, the builder normally wants to take out all the old growth trees in the lot from the street back to the house so that they can move their heavy equipment around the lot. Those old growth trees have a branch sphere. I don't know whether it's called a bough or a bow or whatever, but they're too large to truck out in their full form. One alternative might be to pass an ordinance that required the builder to try to move those old growth trees to the backyard of the property, to keep them out of the way of the heavy equipment but not lose them. The builder wants to do the cheapest thing, which is to tear them down, make them into firewood, and then when they're burned, of course, the carbon is released back into the atmosphere. So common sense rarely rules what cities and counties and states do. But I would suggest that you have your forester at least give you his or her best advice on this, because the thing you shouldn't do is what the Minneapolis Park Board is doing.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Lorenz. Appreciate the thoughts. Anyone else for community comment? All right, we'll move on to the special recognitions, or excuse me, we can move on to the consent agenda. I jumped ahead of myself there. Is there anyone on the council who wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda as shown. Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adopt the items on the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Carried. And then on to special recognitions and presentations. And Kaylin Edina is here this evening and has an interesting presentation for us on building heights.
Hi, Mayor. Hello, Mayor, members of the City Council. Hello. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm Kaylin Edina, the Senior Communications Coordinator with the City of Edina. And I'm here to talk about our October discussion for Speak Up Edina, which was on building heights. Speak Up Edina, we've been, it's a resident engagement platform. We've been holding organized discussions each month for the last few years. However, we've been using the platform since about 2012. Our building heights conversation, in this discussion, we focused the questions on roughly 5 areas, or 5 areas in the city. We focused on 44th in France, 50th in France, 70th in Cahill, Southdale, and the Grandview area. And we asked what building height would residents or visitors be comfortable with and why. The conversation was open from September 23rd to October 31st. We had 194 comments made in total. This made our, this discussion our highest ever commented on discussion. Our previous discussion that had the highest was 129 comments, and that was last July. It was on recycling. And then this is interesting, the highest one before that was on organized garbage hauling with 126 comments, and that was back in 2014. So this was a hot topic. 1,500 users visited the site roughly like 8,000 times, which is very high, triple our visits from the last conversation. And roughly 66.5% of the sessions were actually from people who hadn't visited in the past. And there's our 8,600 page views. So to touch on Grandview, comments were all over the board, but I started out each summary of each area with roughly what the majority said they would be happy with as far as max heights. So for the Grandview, it was between 4 and 6 stories. In all the conversations, congestion and traffic was touched on. So a lot of them said before bringing density or height to the area, fix traffic. Specifically for the Grandview conversation, some residents said utilize the Jerry's Tower as the maximum height in the area and kind of work from that. Some people said make the area more walk and bike friendly, and like I said, some of these conversations kind of got off topic of the height, but I thought it was a valid comment because we had a couple people say that. And then some people said height isn't a huge deal for them in this area, but focus more on the overall aesthetics of the area. So what looks and fits best with the character of that neighborhood. Southdale, between 4 and 12 stories. Again, we had a lot of comments about congestion and traffic. A lot of people said follow the current comp plan. There were a lot of comments that why do we have this if we're not going to follow it. Some people mentioned if we have higher buildings, it's going to increase visual obstruction, add more noise and light pollution, and also increase traffic. Quite a few people said they were comfortable with the taller buildings, 12 stories max, being between France and York Avenues, while the shorter ones on the other sides of those avenues, and having those be roughly 4 stories. And then some people said, you know, let's go higher than 12. Let's bring density to Southdale. If we're going to bring it to any neighborhood in Edina, this is the one we should do that to. And let's increase and have some dependable rapid transit. If you bring the density there, transit will come. 70th and Cahill. Oh, with Southdale, that was our second most comments as far as that neighborhood went. 44th and France was our highest. 70th and Cahill just had a few comments, not many, maybe 7. They said between 2 and 7 stories. Again, people commented on congestion and traffic in this area. They said height should remain the same. Some people brought up, the increased density, the higher the stories, the higher the prices. And this is an area of one of the few areas in the city where naturally affordable housing is. And so they were worried that if we increase the height in this area, it's going to bring up those housing prices, which will price people out who can afford to live there right now. Some people said that height limits should lower as the locations approach residential neighborhoods, and that was another common theme throughout. And then 44th and Francis was our highest. I think we had roughly 75 comments on this neighborhood. People were happy with between 2 and 5 stories. Again, traffic comments. The comments were similar about heights. On France Avenue, they were comfortable with a little more height, but as it approached Morningside neighborhood and the residential homes, to lower it. And they also said that they felt tall buildings took away from the character and charm of the area. And so keeping them on the smaller side kept that small town feel of that area. And then 50th in France, we didn't have too many comments on this, which was a little surprising considering the construction that's going to start soon. But people were happy with between 3 and 4 stories max. Again, congestion and traffic comments. And then some people talked about parking. So before we bring more height or density to the area, increase and focus on parking. So in summary, the majority of the comments spoke about keeping height limits in the comp plan, keep the height limits the same as what they are, and then really, really look into traffic and parking improvements before increasing density, improve walkability of the areas. There were concerns also over the price of land increasing and pricing out small businesses. And then this was a really strong theme throughout all of the areas, was maintaining the emphasis of the importance on neighborhoods with families. That's why people move and live in Edina, is for those areas. So we value those right now, and they want us to continue to do that. Currently, on Speak Up Edina for November, we have a conversation going on about the Grandview Green lid over Highway 100 and possible programming options and ideas for the green space that's going, or as a part of this project idea about just that green space and the park and what residents would like to see if that were to become a reality. You guys have any questions?
Questions? Yeah. Member Fisher.
Well, so thank you. It's no mystery that a lot of people responded. I think this was out right about the time we were all here deliberating over the Estelle project, right?
Yes.
It's kind of a way to attract attention to the topic of height.
It doesn't hurt.
The other thing that really makes clear to me as I read through all these comments is that I actually think it's a reason why we have to be careful about setting height numbers across the city, because I think people too often couple height and traffic or height and density when in fact they're very different things. And the example would be, had we approved the Estelle, the traffic from that project would be less impactful than the traffic from the one-story Shake Shack that was approved. So height does not mean traffic. And I think that's why it's really important that we have conversations around projects and have maybe understandings of density and what we're trying to do, but just blanket putting numbers places, I'm not sure is the right solution. But it was very interesting reading the comments, so thanks.
Member Staunton.
Yeah, I'd just chime in as well. I think one of the challenging things about height is it's hard to have a conversation about it out of context. It's related, and some of it, as I read through the comments, there were actually some folks who were talking about that, saying sometimes it's a trade-off. You get more height, you get more public realm space at your ground level. You get more walkability. You get that kind of parking. You get some other things that you can do as a result of height. And so, as we move forward in this community conversation, and I know it'll be part of the comprehensive plan, we should be talking about it in a context. It's one element of a whole number of factors that go into figuring out what kind of place we want to be.
Thank you, Member Staunton. Member Brindle.
Thank you. I thought that the comments that came in about each of the 5 areas that were asked about were thoughtful, and it was a nice range of comments, and so I appreciate everybody taking it seriously and taking the time to respond. I think Speak Up Edina in each of the topic areas, we've learned a lot about whether it's food trucks or how people feel about recycling and organized hauling, and so it really does give us a read that we might not otherwise get, and so it does invite good participation. Thank you.
Good. All right. Well, and eager to see the outcome of the lid discussion as I move around town. I think the lid is one of the most frequently asked questions I get, or comments. It's really innovative. I like the idea. And the next question is, who's paying for it? So I'm eager to see if those themes are consistent in the
Yes,
in
we
the
have
work that you
seen
do.
some of those comments. But to Member Staunton and Fisher's, your comments, we can hold another Speak Up Edina conversation next year that maybe paints a broader picture and addresses some of those other things. As far as the lid too, what's sometimes tricky about this engagement tool is getting all the information in front of the commenters before they comment. We've seen generally when we had the Highway 100 lid open houses, it was positive, because they saw a lot and heard a lot of background about the project. Online, they just kind of read the intro paragraph where we have the information, and we can link to pages, but they actually have to go there and view it and watch the videos and learn more. So that's one tricky thing about this tool. However, I think like Member Brindle said, it is good to kind of sense out some themes and some overall ideas that we hear from the community. So thank you for having me
Good.
tonight.
Thanks, Ms. Eidsness. All right, we've got an update on the Braemar Golf Course Improvement Project. Director Catry is here, and our course manager, General Manager Joe Boot is here. And he's been working on the golf course so long, he's grown a goatee since we saw him last. He doesn't.
You will sense during this presentation a link between the hour and a half you just spent upstairs and what's happening at our golf course. I did say link.
I think this is our premier storage area.
Good evening. My name is Joe Boot. I'm the general manager at the golf course. I'm here tonight to give you an update on the Braemar Master Plan project. First thing we're going to do is start out with a little video update of what's going on out there and just give you a sense of the progress that's being made. So we'll start out with that. First thing you're seeing is a view of the sunset on the new hole number 13. That's the old number 12. We went a little bit higher up and the green's a little bit deeper. The next one you're seeing is the view from the 14th green looking back at the 13th hole, the new 13th hole. So you can see the elevation in the back, and you can see the progress that we're making on the greens. Next one is a view from the 5th green looking at the 6th tee, and it's overlooking the native area. So you can see some progress there. And we're going to go into a little bit of drone video that we took of the golf course. This is new number 1. It's a 370-yard par 4. It's a great starting hole. It is on the location of the old number 10 from the old golf course. Next up is hole number 2. It's the old number 11. It's a 403-yard par 4, heading out over a little creek and bending over to the right. Great second hole, adding a little bit new type of dimension to the golf course. Next hole is hole number 3. It's a 160-yard par 3. And as you can see to the left, we kept the old windmill that used to be out there from the Hayes farm, so that's still there. Hole number 4 coming up. This is one of Richard Mandel's signature risk-reward holes for the golf course. It's going to be a beautiful par 5, 530 yards. There's going to be a couple different choices for you to make based on risk versus reward. Next up is number 5, short par 3 going out, 177 yards. Up to the upper right is where the 6 tee box is going to be, going back towards the maintenance yard. Next up is a look from up top on hole number 13. It's going to be our new signature hole. It's just looking back over the driving range, and you're coming out. We're actually looking at this hole in reverse just to see how big the hill is and how much of a drop it goes down to the 13th green. Next up is number 14. It's a 439-yard par 4. Once again, you see risk-reward going on the left side with the bunkers. And this was the hole that you could see the actual green growth in one of those first pictures. It was quite a bit different. And the last drone video we have for you tonight is 15. It's a 420-yard par 4. This was basically our wettest hole in the golf course that is now going to be one of the driest, and it's going to be open after a significant rain event. So the drainage that is on that hole, and you can cut off because it'll put it on the loop, but the drainage that is on that hole will allow us to keep playing after significant rain events. And we've seen it because we have had some significant rain events out there, and the golf hole remains what would be playable once everything grows in. So it's a good start.
I should have stopped you when you had one of the photos up there, so you could have told folks on the council and in our community who watch this video about the new bunkers, the new style of bunkers, the better Billy bunkers.
Yes, I can quickly touch on that, especially with the rain events that we've had to date. What we did is we've got an upgraded bunker system. It's called the Better Billy bunker, and we installed it on all of our bunkers out there. And what it uses is it's a pea gravel base with a polymer over top of it, and then you have an angular sand that goes with it, so we won't have a bunker washout like we used to have. It's a tremendous system. They're using it over at Hazeltine where they have the Ryder Cup, so it is, you know what, it's the best of the best. And what that's going to do for the future is for playability after a rain event, golfers will be able to get in there immediately. And from a maintenance perspective, it'll allow, we will not have to go in and repair washouts every time it rains. And to this point, I wish I would have another picture of it. The rain events that we've had 3-inch rain events, and you could have played out of the bunkers the next day. So it's going to be a very good system for us. So, Mid-America, they're still on site and they're working hard. They were a little cold today, but they are moving. Just to give you a little update, we have 11 of the 18 holes that are fully seeded to date. So it is a little bit behind as where we want it to be. Irrigation work up until this point is 95% complete. Cart paths are 75% complete. Tree planting is 65% complete. And like I said, this is represents a delay of the contracted substantial completion date. And it's also going to affect when we're starting to grow in the golf course, because we really haven't started yet, other than they have not turned the golf holes over to us. Mid-America has stated to this point that the reasons for the delay are the weather, and I think you've heard some of that at your pre-council meeting. But Mid-America is working as hard as they can going into the winter time. They are still sodding, which weather will allow for that. They are still working on bunkers, which weather allows for that. So that part is going on as we speak, even though they are a little bit behind. Mid-America is tentatively, they're scheduled to come back May 1st. They will come back earlier than that if things work out well for us in the spring. They will mobilize as soon as we have the first availability to get out there and start working. Some of the items that they're going to need to do in the spring are going to be complete the irrigation work, seed remaining greens, seed remaining fairways, seed tee boxes, seed native areas, complete the cart path, complete the tree plantings. They need to build a large practice green. We utilized that green throughout the year this year, which actually was a benefit to our customers, so that worked out okay. They are going to build the multi-use lawn area and repair any winter erosion that comes up over the winter time. Hopefully won't have too much. And then at the end, they'll be working on the project punch list. As I mentioned before, Mid-America's stated that the reasons for the delay were weather. We believe it's a combination of weather and them being actually the low bid on the project. Mid-America was under the next closest bid by $1.5 million. So there was a substantial difference in between the different bids. And we believe that kind of the schedule that they were working with throughout the year lent itself to being the lowest bid. They tried to stay on a budget that worked into their bid for the project. So I think that was one of the main reasons why they fell behind and into the winter time, or into the seeding window time. They got a little bit behind, and then when time came for seeding in August, September, and October, that's when we got the substantial rain events, and that really killed them. And that seeding window is the most important time because you need about 2 growing seasons for the grass to germinate and to knit and to get together before you would want to open up a golf course. Now that they're coming back in the spring, they're not going to have that second season for it to grow in. And part of the problem is going to be the golf course is going to look beautiful next year. It's going to look absolutely fabulous, but it won't be knit. It won't be that tight fairway lie that everybody would want when we open up a golf course. Just to go into a little bit of the weather impact, they had 75 days of recorded rain. Skip. Okay. Precipitation this year was 37.18 inches, and the average was 28. So we had substantial amount more rain this year than we had hoped for, and that put a lot of things back. Where that leaves us now, we have a couple different scenarios that we need to look at, and it's all going to be weather dependent. We had originally planned for us to be opened up in August. That is not likely at this point. We have some other options that we can consider based on how well we come out of the winter and how we go into the spring. We can open for regular play in September, which again is not necessarily likely, but if we do have perfect condition, it is a possibility. Other options could be open up in September with limited play. We can do that. We can also open up in September for 9 holes of play because we do have 11 holes that are already fully seeded. So there are a few options to look at. Most likely the best option going forward will be to open in the spring of 2019 based on weather conditions. And it's financially, it's not the best thing for us, but it does make the best sense for long-term sustainability of the golf course. The conditions will be in phenomenal shape by that point in the spring of 19, and it's going to be a hard decision for us to maybe start early in that September. It is a financial consideration because we could potentially stop the bleeding a little bit, but it may not be the best thing for us long term. And we have learned from some of the other golf courses in the area that opened up too soon, and it just might not be the best thing in the world for us. So that's one of the factors that we're going to have to take a look at.
Member Stewart.
Are you finished?
I got a few things more. Well, we can stop at that point and kind of.
So I don't want to beat anybody up about this, but I just want to make sure this is transparent for the public in terms of what we're doing. The key now in terms of delays, I was casting about trying to see if there are ways we could work harder to get it done faster, and I've learned just this evening that that's really not possible. That we can't make the grass throw down its roots any faster.
Correct.
And so that's the key really on the opening. And we know that, and as you said, we've seen from other golf courses in the area when they open too soon, it's really detrimental to the long-term health of the golf course. So let's not be penny wise and pound foolish by doing that. So I think we're doing the right thing. I appreciate you letting us know in advance. I was, and to be clear, the delay will cost us, I believe the numbers I saw, somewhere between $600,000 and $1.3 million because of the delay in terms of lost revenue or costs, or however you want to measure that.
Yeah.
So and it's not that Mid-America or our contractor or anybody else, because the issue, the gating issue really is how fast the roots of the grass can get to the right depth.
Correct.
There's not really things that we can incent them to do any faster now that we're in the situation we're in. Is that
Correct.
right? Okay. So that's the piece that I want to make sure the public knows about, and wanted to make sure we drew out here. Thank you.
As we mentioned, we were budgeted to lose. It was already in the plan to lose $700,000 in 2018. We are looking right now at 1.3 of loss, an additional $603,000, what we were talking about. Some of the big line items for that, though, are some accounting line items. Bond interest, which is different than we had this particular year. Depreciation goes up by $100,000, and we also had $100,000 less of a transfer in from the liquor store. So it's not quite as bad as it looks as a cash flow perspective, but it is a difference of $603,000. And we have put a plan in place to reduce payroll and expenditures and to assist in minimizing the loss in 2018. So we are doing that. We are working with the contractor for value added into the project to help recoup some of those losses that we are doing in an operational budget. So that is discussions that are going on right now. As for the total Braemar Golf Course, the project, we are under budget. We have realized some savings in a few different areas. So that is actually going fairly well. We do plan on coming in under budget for the entire project portion of, not the operational budget, but the project portion of the master plan. So that is good, and we are going to continue to try and save as much money as we can going into the future. One of the big impacts this is going to have is the restaurant space. So we just wanted to give you a quick update on the restaurant space. This is what we are presently working on the draft RFP to go out. We want to get the RFP out in December, get the RFP back, the submissions in January, interview people in February, and we're hoping to have somebody somewhere in the spring, early summer of next year. But this will have an impact on the contract that we put in place for that vendor, most likely for the first year. So just to give you guys an update on that.
On that issue, have we learned things in working with Tinfish that we can do better the next time around?
Absolutely. We have learned a lot from that process. I think we're going to have a better contract in place. when we move forward with that. So we did learn a lot, and we learned what to put into the contract and what to keep for ourselves. So there are a few different things that we can do to make things better, but it will be a better situation, and I'm pretty sure that we're going to have a lot of people who are interested in this RFP.
I think the key for a sustainable situation is to have it work for the city and have it work for the vendor. I mean, it really needs to be a true partnership.
Sure.
And so anything we can do to build that really long-term partnership, because we need them to be fiscally healthy in order for them to continue to serve our need.
And I think from an overall restaurant perspective, Tin Fish was doing fairly well out there. We were getting good crowds. They were getting good revenue. I think they felt a little slighted when we changed the overall plan with the master plan process of going to the 18 holes as opposed to 27. So I think they really couldn't get past that position. But I think financially, they were actually doing fairly well, and the restaurant was fairly busy.
That bodes well for the next.
It does. We've definitely had some local restaurateurs come in and say they are extremely interested in the project.
Member Fisher?
Well, it gives them an opportunity for a really long, soft opening.
Yes.
Right? You can work out all the kinks. You have to promote that in the RFP.
Yep.
Member Brindle.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. So it's good to know that that the pace of work is not for a lack of quality or a lack of direction, or so the product we're going to get is a beautiful product, which is what was anticipated all along, and that hasn't changed.
Correct.
And then going beyond that, Director Catre and I had a brief conversation earlier about lessons learned by seeing what happened in St. Paul with opening too early and being anxious, and the grass was beautiful, but it was not stable. It was not strong enough to handle play, and that golf course lost 2 years. Yes. And so we just have to be patient and let this grow in, which our golfers did, waiting for the driving range to be open and waiting for the Academy 9 to be open. So, so it is just something we need to do so that we can get the future of Braemar exactly where it needs to be, which is a quality course. It is, I mean, it just looks stunning from my point of view. So, and I'm excited about the non-golf opportunities that are going to come into fruition around the course as well. And so it's just all around a great plan for the whole city.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
To Member Fisher's point, does the timing of the prospective opening of the golf course change your ideas about the RFP process for a new restaurateur?
I think we want to try and get somebody in there as soon as possible. It may dictate it out that we might have to wait a little bit just to get the best vendor in there. But I think we'll look at that once we get the proposals back. But it may change the timing if that person just doesn't want to get in there when the golf course is closed. And we'll have to consider the other options versus, I mean, we really don't want it dark. We want to get it vibrant like it was and how Tin Fish was doing towards the end. But we do want to take care to get the best vendor in there as well. Mm-hmm. So it might change on the fly.
Good. Any other questions for Mr. Aboud or Director Catre? No. All right, thanks for that
only
update.
That my observation is the drone path. If it wanted to follow the flight of one of my future golf balls, it needs to go way to the right and follow that side.
We're going to do it again in the spring, so we'll take a little bit of a slice angle at it next time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the special recognitions and presentations portion of the agenda. We have one public hearing matter this evening, and Jessica Wilson, our Water Resources Coordinator, has this matter. And it involves the Lake Nancy, relatively newly formed Lake Nancy Lake Association.
Yeah.
Welcome, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Lake Nancy Lake Association formed in 2016, and Lake Nancy is north of Lake Cornelia. It's on the west side of a walking path between a series of a few small ponds there. The Lake Nancy Lake Association requested aquatic vegetation management services from the city, which they're eligible for according to our lake and pond management policy. The services, if rendered, would occur in summer of 2018, and then the property owners, there's 20 adjacent to the pond, there would be assessed the cost of that service equally in the fall of 2018. And the request from council is to authorize staff to go ahead and render those services based on that request from the Lake Nancy Lake Association, and then to assess them back in the fall.
Mayor, can I add
Yes.
one more thing? This isn't a statutory requirement. We just felt it was appropriate since it's a newly formed lake association and we're going to be assessing residents to give them an opportunity to speak in front of the council tonight.
Sure.
So,
Thank you. Good thought. So I see some of the members of the association in the background. Anyone? I'm going to open this matter up for public testimony. Does anybody wish to come forward and address the council? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Connie Carino, 4509 Garrison Lane, and I serve as secretary for this newly formed association, so I felt like it's a public hearing, we might as well make a public comment on behalf of the association. But we've been working with Jessica on setting up the association as well as with the 20 property owners. At our last meeting, annual meeting, we had more than 50% plus one. The required DNR, the DNR requires 50% plus one for any additional services that are going to be assessed. One thing I guess publicly I'd like to state that the association discussion, we were back and forth on whether we wanted to have additional treatment. It's something we want to try. And certainly if it's something that does not work for our lake, we will not continue it. But it just gives us an opportunity to see if we can't meet some of our goals for our mission. And our mission is to maintain, protect, improve the water quality, aesthetic values, wildlife habitat, and recreational capacity of Lake Nancy. So I don't know if you have any questions for our association.
Questions? Member Staunton?
Ms. Carino, you had sent a letter by email as well talking about an ancillary issue. You want to mention that quickly?
Really?
You notice how obliquely I referred to it. I'll leave the dirty work to you.
So one of the other topics that came up at our annual meeting, that walking path that Jessica mentioned is public property. It's a public biking and walking path. And it continues where Wooddale Avenue kind of dead ends into Nancy Lane. Beyond that, heading south, is this path. And it divides Otto Lake and Nancy Lake. And of course, we have a lot of dog walkers that like to use that path. And then they also cross over to Lake Cornelia. I think because it's there's a lot of privacy there. The pet owners think, gee, I don't have to pick up these droppings. So we'd like to see the city consider receptacles along that path, maybe at the beginning and end. And the reason for that, not just because it's a nuisance for those that are walking, but and I think Jessica can comment on this, one of the major detriments to our water quality is the runoff from pet waste. And it is amazing if you get into the stats on what the effects of this runoff from pet waste that isn't properly disposed of. So,
just so I'm clear, you're talking about receptacles like trash cans on either end, or are you talking about the kind of stands with doggy bags?
Well, we would request those that had the bags. I know there's some issues, pros and cons about that. But we'd also like to have a place where there could be some education about just, you know, the importance of it, why it's important to take care of it, but also stormwater, kind of the bigger issue about stormwater runoff. Maybe even some information about leash laws, because of course if your pet's running ahead of you, you can't keep an eye on them and what they're doing. So yes, we would like to see the baggies there, or a place to store some, even if it has to be some public contributions of plastic bags. So, and by the way, plastic bags, don't get too strict on reducing our use in Edina plastic bags, because that's one use for them, is for pet waste. So,
Other questions for Ms. Carino at this point in time?
any other questions?
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to testify regarding this matter or inquire of the council? I don't hear anything. I don't see anybody coming forward. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Second?
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. The request is that this newly formed Lake Nancy Association be provided coordinated aquatic services from the city at an annual assessment to be made by the city to the adjoining property owners. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Just wanted to follow up on the pet waste, and I don't know if there's a policy that we've got in terms of the public areas of the city, the dog park, et cetera. I don't know, Manager Neal, maybe you can enlighten us on this front.
Yeah, I'm not we have sort of a de facto dog park at Weber Woods. We don't provide the bags themselves, but we do provide, there are some garbage cans there that get emptied. You know, we can talk a lot about this if you want to, but I'm not sure that if people aren't inclined to pick up their dog's waste in that area, I'm not sure putting bags there will. I don't think that's the thing that's the missing link. I think it's probably a behavioral thing with the dog owner or herself.
Yeah, I do think and this is probably a longer term deal, but the notion of educational signage and that kind of thing is a nice idea. Yep. To really make people understand that it's an issue affecting the water quality of our water bodies.
Yeah, and there are some good standard signage that we can use to help make that point.
And then the trash receptacles, I think Connie's right. If you, at least until the legislature lets us make up our own mind about plastic bags, we probably will all have plenty of them in our coat pockets as we're walking our dogs.
Didn't we address this issue up at Van Valkenburg Park in terms of having a constant supply of plastic bags up there? It seems to me that we decided not to do that.
I think we did decide not to do it, but the team
Do you recall the reason?
They were all taken.
They were all taken.
Yeah.
So they would fill the dispenser, and the next day the dispenser was empty.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it became a game for someone, I guess. Yeah. They found that there was the full dispenser of plastic bags, and they just ripped them out. And so the park director at the time chose not to offer them any longer. The city was paying for them, and
somebody else was using them.
They were not being used as that they were meant to be used.
Wonder if you could get a good price on the secondary market for those blue doggy bags.
We really do find most dog owners are responsible people, and they take care of this issue. Most do.
Well, you know, I've seen it in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. As pristine as that is, you can be walking on a trail, and there is that nice little bag, neatly tied, sitting next to the trail. And, you know, we have a dog, and we are well behaved, and we're attentive. But why someone would go to the trouble of, I mean, this happens on Indian Hills Road, and I've talked with dog owners, and, you know, what do? Here it is. Look at along the side of the road in Indian Hills. There's a bag there. There's a bag there. They took the trouble to pick it up and tie it shut and leave it at the side of the road. So, you know, there is a mentality that I'll do it because it's the right thing to do, but I'm not taking it home. And that's a mentality that we're going to have to deal with. But somehow, and it may be that education piece, just, you know, just very carefully keep that message out there, and finally it'll make sense to someone who realizes that the water body that they so highly value is impaired, and the reason it's impaired.
Member Fisher, then Member Stewart.
So I think what we're all talking about here is that people behave better when they're being watched. It's just human nature, I think. But what's unique about this little stretch is that it feels like, you know, once you get out in the middle of that, it's a whole different area. And I do think this would be a great place to do a little education, and maybe start with, you know, a garbage can on each end. And I don't know, maybe there's a whole bunch of issues with that as well. But I do think it's certainly worth at least educating people, because I can't think of too many places where there's such a narrow sliver of public right-of-way with water on two sides that is immediately impacted by your behavior. So never a better place to inform people of that. I have a question. I just want to back up one step and just ask, is this sort of a norm? I mean, I can't recall if I've seen this in the just about a year that I've been on the council, but is this the procedure? Is this, you know, the associations come to us and ask for somewhat routine maintenance, and because it's an assessment, then we would essentially make sure if someone doesn't agree with that this is their opportunity to let us know?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. We have a few lake associations that are receiving services already, Arrowhead Lake, Indian Head Lake, and then Mill Pond, and they've been receiving services for decades. And so the fact that we have a new lake association making this request, we didn't really have a precedent for how we start to incorporate that and then do the providing services and assessing. So again, it's not required public hearing, but we wanted to make sure that people had a chance to say something before we started just assessing people that cost. So we're kind of creating this process because decades ago, it wasn't clear how they got started. Yeah.
Member Stewart.
Ms. Wilson, I have a couple questions for you. You might as well stay there.
Yep.
So is this for next year, or is this for a permanent status?
This would be for summer of 2018, and then the group has expressed interest in just trying it for 2018, and then they'll decide after that. And what we require right now is that every year a lake association has to make that request again, and it might be as simple as a simple email that says, keep doing what you did last year.
So if they choose after next year to not continue, do we need to have another vote at the council to stop it, or do we need to have a vote to continue it?
I don't think you'd need to vote again at all.
Okay.
Either way. I think if the request came in, this is kind of establishing that assessment district and the properties that we're proposing to include. So I don't foresee another public hearing to approve it.
Okay, but really the Lake Association controls their own destiny on that.
Right, and they have already voted and had a majority that were in favor. This was just to give a chance for any that really weren't in favor to say something.
All right. And then right now it's anticipated the service would be primarily pumping water out of the lake because it's getting too high, right?
This one has nothing to do with water level management. This one is aquatic vegetation management. So they're requesting that we help them coordinate services to have aquatic vegetation destroyed so that it would improve recreation ability.
Are they native species or are they some non-native?
They are all native. And so this was the other thing that we require with our lake and pond management policy is this kind of requires a lot of participation by the group. They've been really active in having lots of conversations amongst themselves and with the city. And so I kind of share the clean water benefit that those native plants provide. And then they were in favor of that recreation value, which is a trade-off for that clean water service. And so that's why they're saying, well, let's just try it and see how it goes. They value the clean water also, but they want to make sure that they have that recreational ability. And if they're willing to pay for it, our policy allows for that.
And is the vegetation unusually dense in part because of the waste from the animals, or is it, what's happening?
Yeah, there's a moderate density there. I don't know what it would have been in the past. I can't tell you that. I think it would be difficult to canoe through there, but I think as far as whether it's too dense or not dense enough, that might be kind of a perception based on your use.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions for Ms. Wilson? Or any other staff member? All right, we got a motion, we got a second. Had discussion. All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. On to reports and recommendations, and Manager Neal, you have the first matter here, which is the 2017 Human Services Task Force recommendation.
Thank you, Your Honor. Every budget cycle, the city has a process where we allocate some general fund dollars towards human services in the community. We host an RFP process. There's some presentations that happen, and a committee is formed that is comprised of board and commission members that help make recommendations about how you spend this money. And you're going to receive a presentation about that tonight from Jessica Wilson and Christina Martins. I just wanted to say you've had a fair amount of exposure to Jessica Wilson tonight, and this is not her subject area, as you know. But this year, with the number of public engagement processes we had going on, we needed some help. We needed a management staff member to step forward to sort of shepherd this process, manage it, administer it going forward. And we put out a call, and Jessica volunteered to do that. So this is out of her subject area, but she did a really nice job with it. And I just wanted to know what the context was for associating her going from stormwater management to human services spending. So,
all right, good. Thank you. Member Brindle, did you have a comment?
So in past years, because I asked a question about this, and in past years we've had this chunk of money for human services funding, and then we've had CDBG funding.
Right.
All right. And so are we going to continue to get CDBG funding, and that is administered through a different channel?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure, because there's all sorts of rumors out there about the fate and future of CSBG and CDBG funding.
Oh yes, I mean that is out of our hands,
Okay.
but it is. You're right. There's a lot of discussion going on now about the federal level and whether CDBG has got a future with local governments. But
right.
This is general fund tax money that the city has allocated for many years towards human services funding in the community. We do this through service contracts because the city is not allowed, from a statutory standpoint, to give charitable donations to worthy organizations. So that's why we organize this the way that we do.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for that introduction. The Human Services Task Force was comprised of 6 members from different boards and commissions, and I have Christina Martin here. She's the chair of the group, and so we're going to keep this really brief. I'm going to give her a chance to kind of describe the group's recommendation for you. Over the past several months, the group has worked to develop the RFP, hear presentations, review proposals, and draft a recommendation, and that's been part of your packet. There's $91,532 that was available for the 2018 budget, and the task force deliberated to decide how they were going to distribute those funds based on the groups and what they valued of those. So I'll introduce Christina Martin, and she can really briefly just kind of tell you about the task force, and then we'll answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Ms. Martin, welcome, and thank you for your work and the rest of your team as well.
Absolutely. We did. We had a great team that had a lot of members from different boards and commissions. They all brought their diverse backgrounds and perspectives on what Edina needs when it comes to the human services funding. So we had 6 organizations who applied for the funding this year, or for the next 2 years, this cycle. They're all really important. They all make a real difference in our community. We were able to fund all of them. What we did when we sat down and we argued it through was looking at what Edina needs and making sure that we had a balanced give between the different areas of need in our community. We also looked and weighed heavily on the organizations that really collaborated with other Edina organizations, the police department, the fire department, areas like that. Within the applicant pool, we had groups that have been a 40-year impact organization to Edina, and also ones that have only been around for a couple of years. We also have ones that focus only on Edina and the people who support those residents of Edina, along with people who support communities all over Minnesota. So with that, we sat down and we kind of set aside what did they get last year, and instead said, this is what they're asking for, with how much they give to our community, what we want to see kind of coming forward, things like that. How do we break this up? And so that's kind of how we came up with our recommendation. Any questions on the recommendation or anything?
Member Fisher.
Thanks. I mean, I think all of your rationale was really sound, and I think, how you approached who got what made sense. I was intrigued by the comment that you think we should do a better job letting organizations know about this, so you might get a bigger pool requesting the money. But I was curious if, actually I have many questions, and I don't know. So everything you did seems spot on, and like the group did a great job. My questions are sort of back a step, and you explained a little bit, which maybe, but the little notes I wrote here is, where's this money coming from?
Sure.
What is the budget we're working from? Why does the city get involved in this? Because normally I think of this as sort of county type things. I think I heard you say that it's basically we just take some money out of the general fund because it seems like the right thing to do, and historically we've done it. And I'm just, because that would lend itself to, I think, the question the group was asking is, is there a, because this group came up with some great rationale, and but it seems a bit like it was an ad hoc group put together. So 2 years from now, or is it next year? I don't know. Would they come up with entirely different rationale?
Sure.
So I'm really asking this out of I'm trying to gather context for myself.
I'll try to answer some of those. And the city attorney can probably give some additional context to this discussion too. But for many years, it was pretty common for cities to allocate money to their local food shelf or their local clothes closet or other sorts of charitable nonprofits in their communities because city councils felt they were doing good for the people of their town and they needed money, so the city helped them by providing them money. We're not allowed under state statute to make charitable contributions with tax dollars. So cities then had to step back away from that kind of behavior a decade ago, Roger, maybe 2 decades ago.
More than a decade.
I'll guess 15 years.
15 years, okay. And we went about trying to accomplish the same ends, but doing it in a more kind of formal business-like way, where if you will, by entering into service agreements with these same organizations to say, if you'll do X, we'll provide you Y funding. And that's what we do here, and that has seemed to survive the kind of the AG's test of spending this money. What we have done historically here is we have, for the last 2 budget cycles, because we budget for a 2-year purpose, or a 2-year time period, we have established something called the Human Services Task Force. And the Human Services Task Force is an ad hoc task force that's comprised of volunteer members from all of our other boards and commissions. So it's a joint effort. They self-identify and they volunteer themselves to be part of this. They receive the proposals, they rank them, they interview, and then they make those decisions that are difficult to decide about who gets how much money, and they do look at what they got last year. We do some testing about what we gave money to, and did they do what they said they were going to do. So there's some compliance testing. The amount of money is determined, really has been based on what we had done the previous years, plus a kind of cost of living increase from year to year. And that number, if you make these awards tonight as proposed, we would include that number as a solid number in the budget in the 18 and the 19 budgets. So at this moment, that number is, I would consider to be proposed, but if you approve these agreements tonight, I'd consider that number to be secured in those upcoming budgets.
So in effect, this was it was in the last budget, and it's now coming to fruition with the help of the committee.
Right. So what this committee is doing is allocating or is making an allocation recommendation to you for how we spend this money in 2018 and 2019. And this money is included as a department in our general fund budget. So it comes from general fund property taxes.
Okay. At every meeting, I am surprised by something, or I learned something significant, and this is the thing at this meeting. So from all I can tell, they did a really great job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Member Stewart.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we publicly acknowledge and thank, in addition to Jessica and Christina, Eric Ruthruff, Amanda Herr, Brian Berube, Cheryl Guinness, and Patrick Willett for the work on the commission, on the task force. I really appreciate the work, and you guys have done a great job. Thank you.
Member Brindle.
Thank you. Just to add to that context a little bit, I served for several terms on the Human Rights and Relations Commission, was chair of that commission twice. And during that time, it was the job of that commission to handle the human services funding each year. And so we had a process, and we had a measurement tool to find out, of the dollars that you're requesting based on the performance last year. And so basically, the dollars that they're requesting are basically the cost to them to provide service to Edina residents. And so that's the measurement behind the number that I think is important to have. It's not an arbitrary number of what makes sense for that organization to have. They have to prove that that's what they need because they serve this many people at this cost. Going forward, looking at unmet needs and expanded need, this is the increased cost in the next biennium of what those services are going to cost toward the next time. So I appreciate your hard work on this. And it's a continuation of, I think, a really important gesture made toward the organizations, which are all nonprofits, and working for the good of the citizens of Edina to make their lives more comfortable. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Yeah, I would join Member Brindle in saying that these organizations that you recommended we support through our general fund budget are critical to what we do in our community, both with respect to things as broad as Oasis for Youth or VEAP, but also other organizations like Beacon Interfaith and 66 West. So I thought you did a great job of analyzing everything and determining the organizations that we would support and the levels of support as well. And a lot of these same organizations are supported by the service clubs in our community. So I think there's some nice continuity of support there. Appreciate that as well. Is there a motion on this matter?
So moved.
Second. Got a motion and a second to approve the 2018-2019 Human Services funding as recommended by our task force. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now the Director Catry has the proposed public engagement plan for activity at Arden Park.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hovland, members of the council. I have before you this evening a very brief presentation on the proposed design phase for the Arden Park master plan. As you recall, the City Council approved the Arden Park concept plan and memorandum of understanding with the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District on September 19th. At that meeting, the City Council requested that staff put together a proposed public process for the design phase of the project. That's why I'm here this evening. The Minnehaha Creek Watershed District held a public hearing for the project on October 26th, and they authorized the project and the memorandum of understanding on November 9th. They also provided positive feedback regarding the proposed design process summary that I have before you this evening. On November 14th, the Parks and Recreation Commission was asked to review and recommend the public engagement plan for Arden Park, and the Commission was very supportive and voted to recommend this plan. The master planning process for Arden Park is complete and approved. We're now planning to enter the design phase of the process, which will take the concept plan to bid documents and getting into the detailed engineering to determine the best design of plan for cost, function, and for the environment. The design process that is proposed before you this evening is not typical for the way that we have managed the design phase of projects historically. I personally have completed design phases for Countryside Park, Pamela Park, Braemar Field and Backyard, the Braemar Golf Dome, Academy 9, Driving Range, and Regulation Course projects. None of these projects included public review, including open houses, Parks Commission, or City Council presentations. The only exception to this is when a significant issue was encountered, say soil corrections or some other major scope that we wanted to come back to the council that either required a change in plan or required additional funding. We did have a situation like this when we added the Braemar Backyard Rink to the Braemar Field project, and there were several soil corrections and other additions with retaining walls and those sorts of things that were added later on in the project. The design process summary that is proposed this evening contains 12 public meetings, including 9 additional public meetings that would not typically be included in a design process. The only meetings typically that would be included would be a final review by the Parks and Recreation Commission, a final review and bid authorization from the City Council, and final review and permitting and bid authorization from the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. So with that, I would like to go over the plan that we are proposing this evening. This plan was created with me, with Renee Clark from the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, also with input from Jessica and Ross from our engineering departments. So Jen, oh, we've got the document on here. I'm not sure if everyone can see this. Can we zoom in a little bit maybe on the, thank you very much, that's perfect. So the design phases as we're proposing are exactly what we would typically see in any design phase for a project, including a 30, 50, 90%, and 100% design. But what we're including in terms of public engagement, reports back to the Parks and Rec Commission, open houses, report back to City Council and Minnehaha Creek Watershed District is what makes this design process unusual. So as I have here, we are proposing the 30% design phase to start almost immediately. We might be starting as soon as next week, at the very latest, the first week in December. That's where we'll be looking at the stream alignment, tree preservation, and starting really to look into the geotechnical aspects of that site. We'll also be looking at bridge, looking where the pavilion is going to go exactly. And then we're proposing to, in early January, report back in the form of a public open house, a report to the Parks and Rec Commission, and to the Edina City Council and the Minnehaha Creek Watershed Board. We'll take feedback that we received at those meetings and move into the 50% design phase. That's where we'll get more into the building plans, into the creek, terrace at the pavilion, more detailed trail layout, terrace overlooks. Again, we're not looking to redo the plan that we have, just do a final alignment of those components. After that, we're proposing to come back in a public open house, similar to what we did in the first phase, except this time we're wanting to get out into the park. And we want to work with my recreation staff and maybe do some type of an event in the park that's going to attract families to try to get more people interested and engaged in the process. After that, again, we'd report back to the Parks and Recreation Commission, the City Council, and the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board. Again, we would take that feedback and we would move to the design, to the 90% design phase. That's when we're really digging into those final details. We're putting the final plans and specifications together to get ready to put the project out for bid. Again, we'll come back one more time. We'll do another open house in the park, similar to what we did earlier in May. That would occur sometime in August. We'll report back to the Parks and Rec Commission, the City Council, and the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board. At that point, we'll be into the 100% design phase, and we'll be ready to put the project out for bid. A couple of other elements that are not included with that first phase are two other significant park projects that would happen concurrently that would have two distinctly different public processes. One would be for the design of the park shelter building, and the other would be for the design of the playground. We haven't even begun to touch on the design of either one of those structures, which makes it different from the rest of the plan design that we have completed in a very significant public process so far. So this is the type of process that we've done before in our shelter buildings and playgrounds, where we do put together a neighborhood committee along with Parks and Recreation commissioners and staff to really work on the design of the building and the design of the playground. So those, both of those would happen in 2018.
Questions for Director Catry?
Yes, with that I stand to answer any questions.
Member Staunton.
So help me understand in this first, in each of these phases, you're going to have an open house, the Park Commission, the Council, and the Watershed District, it looks like, will review. How are you going to go about taking input and figuring out, I mean, there's a number of steps in each of these. There's the tree preservation, the bridge and pavilion study. I mean, you're going to have a design that presumably is going to pick a volume level, if you will. We talked a lot during the whole concept review process about the level of sanitizing of the park, if you will, and that people were very concerned that it be the right level of character. And so how do you propose, as you go through that process, to harvest the feedback and feed that into the next stage of design?
Thank you, Member Staunton. I appreciate that question. And we do feel that we have received very significant direction from the Parks and Rec Commission, the City Council, and the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District on a few different components of this plan that we absolutely will include with our consulting team as we work into these final designs. For the creek alignment, we have firmly received the direction from this council to minimize tree loss and protect high-value trees, to avoid impacts to green space wherever possible, to optimize the alignment, increase the environmental uplift and cost, and to maintain the rustic character of the park, again, preserving trees, and look at trees and replanting, buckthorn removal, those sorts of things. And also from a recreational standpoint, we're looking at fishing, how we can improve fishing not just in one area of the park, but throughout the area of the park, and how we can also increase the recreational amenities throughout the entire creek. Again, not just at one location throughout. In terms of exactly how we plan to receive feedback, honestly, we haven't got into that quite level of detail, but I can tell you that we will do a process similar to what we did throughout the initial phase, in that we will be taking feedback on site. We will be putting together a very detailed website that the process will be updated. We'll certainly keep people updated through social media and that sort of a thing. But exactly how we're going to collect that information, honestly, I don't see us going through surveys where we're collecting 700 responses. I think that it's going to be more of a presentation asking residents in these different areas if they see any areas of concern, and taking that in the open houses is probably what I would say right off the top of my head. So
I went back today and looked at our September 19th meeting and just kind of the wrap-up of that, and there was a lot of, one of the things that happened in this, we were talking about concept, and we were stuck in this netherworld where we knew a lot about the project, but many of the things people expressed concern about just hadn't been designed yet. And so we recognized that there was a lot to do going forward once we made the commitment to say we're going to go ahead with this project. And I know in my motion to approve the MOU and proceed with the concept plan, one of the things I had suggested was, as a condition of that there be some public engagement. And at the time, I mentioned the possibility of an advisory committee made up of neighbors, et cetera, but I also said that I wasn't going to micromanage that, and I'd leave that to staff. But I'm wondering if you can share with us a little bit about what kinds of things you went through in terms of thinking about what the right level of public engagement was and why you've landed on what you have.
Certainly, Member Stoughton, thank you for the question. We gave this a lot of thought. We had a lot of conversation between our two organizations. We had a lot of conversation internally. We had a lot of conversations with City Manager Neal. Part of what we wanted to do was we wanted to acknowledge the wishes and the concerns of council, certainly. We also wanted to take a look at some of the processes that we've done before, and we wanted to be mindful of precedences that we might set moving forward for projects. We feel that the process that we have designed here is an opportunity to reach more people, significantly more people than we would reach if we were to just do some sort of a smaller subcommittee. This is a public process, I think, in a design phase that is more significant than a public process than we typically do on a master planning phase for a project. I mean, it's almost like a duplication of a master planning effort. And we just felt like this might be the best way to make sure that we got ourselves and our ideas and our concepts out to as many people in a variety of different ways as we possibly could. We also feel strongly that we're relying on expertise and interests of Parks and Recreation Commission members who have participated in this process all the way along in the form of a sort of an advisory committee. We certainly, as we have done with the Fred Richards project and the Braemar Master Plan project, we know those residents that are very interested in this project, and I can assure you that we will actively engage them and make sure that they are able and have an opportunity to participate in the public process moving forward. But, honestly, we're pretty proud of the plan that we've put forward just because it is so significant, and feel that it's a great opportunity to reach as many people as possible.
Thank you. I'd just say, I understand that it's unusual, but I think it was an unusual project, an unusual process that we went through where we were, there was a lot of interest in this and a lot of passionate feelings, and so we're trying to make sure we get it right. So I appreciate your focus on that, and I think the really important part is that if this is the process we're going to use, that we listen. And we incorporate that at each stage. And I get that, listening is harder than it sounds because not everybody's saying the same thing. But I guess, you'll also have the Park Commission as well as the Council and the Watershed District at each of these stages to give you feedback as well. Thank you.
Member Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Catchfrey, I just want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for hearing the Council when we asked to have really a significant level of ongoing public engagement on this issue. it was a difficult set of decisions to make regarding the approval of the project, and so as we go forward, I think you're exhibiting really a nice level of sensitivity to that. I also thought the summary you gave of the issues you heard us talk about was really a great summary, and thank you for capturing that so well and for having that top of mind. So having said all of that, I do want to make sure that we don't overburden the process with a lot of extra steps that would either add time to the project, because we know that during the construction it's likely to be a bit of an eyesore, and that we don't want to add cost to the project. Could you address any of that, please?
Absolutely. Member Stewart, thank you for the question. I can tell you that the process as proposed will not extend the time frame at all. Renee and I worked very closely together on this timeline to make sure that we were able to not only meet every commission meeting, every council meeting. It's tight. I mean, it's a lot to get done in the next year for sure, but it will not extend any construction time. We have staff time for this project and for the consultants built into the project budget. So we will do our very best to work diligently to stay on schedule and on budget.
Well, and I have the sense that one of the important aspects of this will be the whoever the supervisor of the construction crew is in the field, we really want that person to have high level of sensitivity about sort of on-the-spot, on-site decisions that need to get made every day to not slow down the process, but how do you deal with it? But once we've knocked down a tree, we can't resurrect it very easily, so we really need to have that sense of the importance of how this is done, go through that whole contracting crew that is working on this. So I think you're off to a great start, and I thank you for that.
Member Fisher.
So I'd also like to thank you for a very, what appears to be a very thoughtful approach to this. So I do a lot of community engagement, and one of the preconceived notions, and I will say preconceived notions I had, was that you might have. In fact, I was looking through this. Well, who are the community members that are going to be with our two park board members on this little ad hoc sort of stakeholder group? And the reason I think that way sometimes, and the peculiar nature of this particular issue as we all lived through it, is that there were very clearly leaders sort of on both sides that had a lot of knowledge and had a lot of passion. And I mean, think about this story. Think about people out doing field trips and sharing detailed information. Think about people sharing their own scientific data to compete with our scientific data and all of that. And so one way that I think about how you best utilize that sort of passion is that you have a couple representatives that are sort of leaders in that process at the table with your consultants, with the staff team, looking at things like, well, which trees end up, are we going to have to sacrifice versus which ones do we save? And then in that process, they sort of go back, they actually help present at those community meetings. I mean, the community meetings are still going to be critical, maybe not as many in that other scenario, but it's not so much staff and consultants presenting as it is their neighbors saying, hey, we've been sitting there at the table and we kind of feel like we've all worked together and this is as good as it can get for these reasons. And it's another way of sort of getting the buy-in by folks. Because at the end of the day, this is about getting buy-in. And we all know that we've said we're going to do this project, so it's a matter of how it looks and how it gets done. If you're telling me that you've all thought through that and you feel like this is the way to get the buy-in, I'm with you. But I think if I'm picking up a little bit on Councilmember Staunton's comment that in this scenario, without that sort of smaller group kind of doing the more detailed work and then bringing the information out, you're going to be really asking those people, because they're not going to want less, we know their expectation of detail. We've seen it, we heard it. So that'll be there. So when you're at those meetings and they're going to ask those kinds of detailed questions, and you're going to have to somehow have a way to answer them and then listen to them, and then the next meeting be able to very clearly show them how you either changed or didn't change the design based on those very specific comments. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. But if this is the way you think you can best do that, I'm in. So, thank you.
Thank you. Member Brindle.
Thank you. This is it's kind of midstream, sort of after the fact and in advance as well. Just a thank you to the Park Commission members. When we interview people who are interested in serving on the city's boards and commissions, it's one of the most amazing experiences. It used to be this was just the mayor's job. And over time, the full council got involved, and it's a couple of evenings of meeting people some of whom you wouldn't otherwise meet. And it's a great bunch of people. And this is one example of the kind of work that our commissioners do, and we rely on them to do. And they meet with the public, they listen to the public, and they advise us on things that we're going to decide, and they take direction from a decision that council has made, and that's this situation. So, this is a great schedule, and from what I can see, it's a very conservative schedule. So it seems to me that if we get a good hard freeze, there ought to be some chance to do some work this winter in the creek. And without a hard freeze, that's going to be a difficult thing to do. But if winter cooperates, they'll be able to get out there and do some of that creek work this winter. So it's exciting to see it begin. Thank you for your leadership, and it's a project that I think the whole neighborhood is going to appreciate. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Brindle.
Here's what I appreciate about your schedule and about what you heard from the council during the process and what you heard from the public during the process, is that they wanted to have continuing input of some sort. So at 30% design, at 50% design, at 90% design, at every one of those mileposts, you're going back to the public, you're going back to the Park Commission, you're coming back to us. And in terms of gathering up, Member Fisher mentioned, how are you going to gather up all those comments? We'll leave that. You'll figure out how to do that. And we do a good job of gathering data, I think, and comments. And so you'll come back to us with that information. We'll be able to distill it and make a decision and give you some more guidance. Same thing at the 50% mark and at the 90% mark. I think those three sort of mileposts are really important. And I appreciate the way you set that up so that there'd be that opportunity for continuing public input. And I think that's really important. I had two suggestions from somebody from the neighborhood, and that was, I guess, reaffirming in public review phase 3 at 90% design. They did reaffirm that you should have that meeting with the public open house mid to late August. Maybe leaning more towards late August. People are back in town, that narrow window. People are back in town from vacation. School hasn't started yet, but they're getting ready for that. Yeah. And then the other matter you mentioned was park shelter design, and then that comment was from the neighbor, make sure that we have a warming house in the wintertime. Do that work in the off season. And for me personally, I would say of park buildings that I've seen, I think you have a great design in Pamela Park, and I'd like to maintain that sort of standard when we go into that phase in this particular park. So those are my comments. All right. Any other comments from council members? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve the plan for community engagement for the Arden Park design phase.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just mentioned it's not this winter, it'll be next winter.
Yep.
Okay.
It is.
Anything else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Good. Thank you, Director Catry. And now, Manager Neal, we have something in front of us that you've been working on for a while, and I've got some knowledge of it as well, and that is a request by the Chamber of Commerce for a modification of our lodging tax agreement. So,
thank you, Your Honor, members of Council. I'm going to give a brief intro and some background information to Council, and then Lori Severson from the Chamber and two members of the Chamber Board and the Explore Edina Board will also give you some information about the proposal tonight. Back in 2000, latter half of 2013 and the first part of 2014, the City Council and the Chamber, the City and the Chamber were engaged in a discussion about whether or not to create a Convention and Visitors Bureau and impose a lodging tax to fund the activities of that bureau. After a fair amount of conversation with both boards and with the board and the council decided to go forward with that proposal. And so in April of 2014, the City Council adopted an ordinance that imposed a 3% lodging tax, and that's the lodging tax. That's the lodging tax that we can impose as a Plan B city government. Other cities, you may know, have higher lodging taxes, and they have special legislative provisions to do that, special legislative authority. We did, part of the process of setting up, of adopting the lodging tax was that we worked with the Chamber, and the Chamber established a nonprofit organization called Explore Edina to serve as our Convention and Visitors Bureau. They would operate that as kind of a subsidiary organization within their structure. Lori Severson served as the chief of that organization and hired an additional staff person to do a fair amount of the actual tourism work. Her name is Shelley Loberg, and I know that some of you know Shelley. Recently, the Chamber has decided to make some organizational changes, structural changes, and one of those changes was to dissolve the Explore Edina organization as a separate standalone nonprofit. They want to blend those functions into their overall organization. There are some statutory concerns that we have as the folks that impose the lodging tax and are accountable for how lodging taxes are spent. We've had a lot of discussion about that, and I think they can address any concerns that we have about that. I'm recommending to you that we grant this change in the agreement tonight, and I think Ms. Severson is probably ready to explain why this change is necessary and what benefits there might be to the city and to the Chamber because of it. Mr. Hunt. Thank you.
Questions for Manager Neal at this point in time? All right. Welcome, Ms. Severson.
Thank you very much, Mayor, members of the Council. I appreciate your time this evening. My name is Lori Severson. I'm President of the Edina Chamber of Commerce and Explore Edina. As City Manager Neal had mentioned, we're here this evening to receive approval to amend our letter of agreement between the City of Edina and Explore Edina. Our request this evening is actually on behalf of Explore Edina to transfer the responsibility for marketing services from Explore to the Chamber. And joining me this evening, I have Tim Murphy, who is the current board chair of Explore Edina, Jack Abdo, treasurer for Explore Edina, Joel Hilgendorf, current board chair of the Edina Chamber of Commerce. And I'm going to ask Joel to come up and tell you a little bit about why we're asking for the change to our letter of agreement. Joel?
Thank you, Ms. Severson. Welcome, Mr. Hilgendorf.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I want to echo all of the background that Mr. Manager Neal said, and just to add to that, both Explore Edina and the Chamber underwent a significant long-term strategic planning process, and one of the outcomes of that was that it was recognized by the organizations that they would benefit from combining resources, both to reduce some inefficiencies. They were sharing staff, they were sharing office space and a number of other items, and also that they could benefit just from working together. And so they formed a joint committee to explore that idea further, and the result of that effort was this idea of legal restructuring, that Explore Edina would dissolve as a separate organization and come under the umbrella of the Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce would take on those services that Explore Edina was providing. And that is the specific reason for this request for modification of the agreement. And I think Mr. Murphy is going to explain a little bit more about the continuing benefits of why we're doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Hogendorf. Mr. Murphy, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Hovland and council members. Thank you for the consideration of this amendment to our agreement. What does this mean to the city of Edina? First, I'm Tim Murphy too, by the way, current chair of Explore Edina and chair to be of the Edina Chamber. The brand Explore Edina will not go away. Visitors coming to the community will still see Explore Edina and will continue to visit the Explore Edina website. We will continue to market the city as well as expand our activities as our budget permits. Combining the two organizations provides us opportunities we're not able to realize as one organization. One board to help us lead a more coordinated effort. Further take advantage of synergies and overlap between our two organizations and additional cost savings. No jobs are being eliminated or added. Existing staff responsibilities, however, will expand. Earlier this year, Shelley Loberg was promoted to Director for Explore Edina. She will continue to take on more responsibilities and be more visible within our community. Erica Holman will engage in helping assist Explore events such as our fashion show and free up Shelley's time. And I believe Jack would like to say a few words about the financial oversight of this transition.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Welcome, Mr. Abdo.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Thank you, council members. I am the current treasurer of Explore Edina. I'll continue on as the treasurer of the combined organization. I think we went through a really nice process and completely agree with everything that's been stated ahead of this. I just wanted to state that the firm of Abdo Eich & Myers accounting firm, which I'm a part of, has been doing the accounting along with Lori and the Chamber and Explore separately, doing separate returns and financial statements. We will continue to do the accounting separately per each division and then consolidate those financial information so we'd only have one tax return, one annual report. But monthly we'll be reporting to the board both the Chamber's activities and the Explore activities as they had been, so that we will track the lodging dollars and that expense, and that it is going to promoting the city of Edina and bringing visitors to the city as we had been doing all along. So just want to make sure that you're aware that we will track both organizations and the dollars that are coming through the lodging.
And if I could expand on Jack's explanation there, as stewards, you are stewards of the lodging tax fund and you have oversight of what we do with those dollars. I want to guarantee that we have set up a firewall between the Chamber and Explore Edina. What we're doing is combining them as legal entities, but for financial purposes, the lodging dollars will continue to be housed in a separate financial institution. And as Jack explained, those funds will be kept completely separate. We don't really see any change in our Explore Edina budget at this point until we have another lodging property that adds a few dollars to our revenue. But for your purposes, everything will remain the same. The financial statements that Mayor Hovland saw and City Manager Neal saw while serving on our board will remain exactly as they have been. But we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions from council members? Okay. Mr. Abdo, on the firewall, financial firewall side, could you articulate in a little bit more detail how you intend to do that Ms. Severson has talked a little bit about it, but I think it's important to understand that there couldn't be any monies transferring back and forth, for example, and how you prevent that.
I mean, there could be monies transferring back and forth, and we would track that. I would suggest that it's much like city government funding. So in city government, you got a general fund, you have your, you know, if you have a liquor store, you'd have a liquor store fund. Those things are tracked separately by your accounting department, but it all comes together under one city financial statement at some point, and you can see all those funds. So we are going to track each one separately, just like different city funds. But in the end, when we file a financial tax return, they're going to have to be consolidated into one balance sheet, one income statement. But the tracking is there, and well, as Lori had mentioned, there'd still be a different checking accounts, you know, and we'll follow those accounts and we'll follow those expenses out of those accounts. But there sometimes will be an expense that one check but allocated to both organizations. So, you know, some of those things are going to happen, but we will be tracking them separately through the accounting.
And Mayor, if I could expand on that a little bit, I'll give you examples of the type of transfer that Jack is speaking of. Right now, for example, half of my salary is paid for by Explore Edina. Explore Edina shares in half of our leasing and our rental space. So it's for those types of activities as they have been. At this point, I don't see any transfer that would be different than what we have been doing for the last 3.5 or 4 years.
Good. And Mr. Knutson, you've looked at this and you put your blessing on it from a legal standpoint, I take it?
Mayor, that's correct.
All right, good. Thank you. Member Fisher.
So I do have a question. So I'm on the Explore Edina website right now, and so what I'm understanding is that brand, that presence, for most people, they would never know this happened. It's just, it's really the back of house, how all of that is working and the financials and the more efficiency in the operation.
Exactly. Just to help us from an operational perspective, you'll go on, well, actually you could still do that today, go on to the Chamber's website, and if you're a visitor, you'll click on visitor, and on the back end you have that soft link that goes right over to Explore Edina. We like the brand Explore Edina, so visitors coming will still see that and we'll continue to use that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve the new Visitor and Convention Bureau, or actually Convention and Visitor Bureau agreement with the Edina Chamber of Commerce.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Manager Neal, there was a, in our materials, there was a ordinance, but I think it's just a restatement of the existing ordinance.
That's right. There's no change to that ordinance. I just wanted you to see when the the ordinance said and when it was approved.
Good. So I think it's the only action item that we need to address. All right. Thanks, Mr. Knudsen.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Severson,
Appreciate
thanks.
it. You're welcome.
Mr. Hogendorf, thank you. Everybody, Mr. Murphy, Mr. Abdo, and Mr. Grumman, thank you for your support. All right, we got Mr. Urim here, and Nick Anhut is here from Ellers, fresh from the bidding activity on some of the bonds we've been discussing. And Don, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm happy to be here tonight, telling the City Council that we've actually saved a substantial amount of money. The bids for both the private placement as well as the public offering were well received, and we're going to save in excess of $1.6 million on both projects combined. I'm going to let Nick kind of go through the details, but the one thing I want to talk about briefly is the private placement. So the private placement isn't something that I understand that we don't do very often here. So what we did in this case is we took the opportunity, we contacted 10 local banks to give them the opportunity to bid on kind of the smaller of the offerings. 2 banks stepped up to the plate and actually offered bids, and I just want to publicly acknowledge them. The first one and the winning bidder was Tradition Capital Bank in Edina Bank, And the other bank that I've worked with historically is Signature Bank. And Signature Bank just announced that they are being acquired by Minnesota Bank and Trust, another Edina bank. So strong local commitment from our banks. And I can tell you that Traditional Capital Bank is proud to be part of this and is looking forward to a continued relationship with the city of Edina. So Nick, if you want to talk about the results.
Thank you. Shira.
Great. Thank you, Mayor, council members. Nick Anhut from Ehlers & Associates, and we are municipal advisors to the city, advising on finances. And I am very pleased with the results that we received this morning, both in terms of the placement as well as the capital improvement bonds that were refunded. So in the prior meeting, the council did authorize a public offering of $9.4 million to refinance, essentially, what was bonds issued for the Public Works facility. That was the outstanding balance of the 2009A issue. Those bonds carried interest rates above 4%, and with the results of the bids this morning, the winning bid from Baird came in below 1.99% interest rate, and what that translates to is $1.4 million of reduced debt service cost over the 12-year life of that remaining debt. Similarly, on the private placement, those were bonds issued for the Braemar ice facility. We were refinancing the balance of that, again, rates above 4%, and the fixed interest rate that was bid by Tradition Capital Bank came in at a fixed 2% over the life of the bonds. So nearly identical interest costs between the two of them. That savings achieved on the ice arena bonds equates to $235,000 over the life of that bond issue. On a present value basis, both of these equate to about 11% savings from what was programmed already on the city's debt. So it'll be a significant amount of savings that you'll achieve over that time period. The one difference between the two, I will note, is the larger of the issues, the $9 million in CIP bonds. We actually had a discussion and decided to present an opportunity to shorten the term of that debt. So there were 12 years outstanding on that balance, and we were able to cut 1 year off from that and still achieve a cash flow savings on an annual basis. So the majority of that $1.4 million will be achieved in that final year by reducing that payment. But you still will have roughly $38,000 annually that'll be reduced off of your levy as a result of this refunding. So again, very positive results, very favorable feedback from the marketplace. We did receive 8 bids in the public offering, and we certainly recommend that the council does award both of these bonds this evening.
All right, Director Urim.
Mayor, members of the City Council, one thing I failed to mention is in your packet tonight there were ratings reports from both S&P and from Moody's. So both reaffirmed AAA bond ratings for the City of Edina. So that's very positive. Some of the things they mentioned were really a strong local economy. And strong financial, strong financials, budget flexibility, good financial management, both from a council level and from a staff level. So very positive remarks from both rating agencies. So,
thank you, Director Urim. Mr. Anhut, any observations on the Moody's and Standard & Poor's reaffirmation of our double AAA bond rating?
We had a recent conversation with them in the spring related to some of the new projects that the city financed. And I would say that the conversations were consistent, but I did note from both of them that the analysis behind the scenes did improve from that time period. So we did have some conversations about improved performance of the liquor fund over the course of the year, some consistency in expectations for the year-end fund balances, and they certainly are reflected in the comments of that report. So I think both of those ratings are strengthened since that last call.
Good. Director Urim, we would thank you for your team's good work, but Manager Neal, for your overall guidance and leadership. I think that's critically important as well, so thank you for your good work. Yeah, is there such a thing as a triple AAA?
If you'd like to give the good people at Fitch about 10 grand, and we'd probably get that one too.
We would want to weigh the cost benefit of obtaining another rating, but I have no doubt that the city would perform very well.
All right.
We are very competitive. So.
And our friends in Bloomington do have it. So. Really? Yes, they do.
Huh. Our friends in Bloomington, what?
Triple A.
Oh.
They do?
Now you
planted the seed.
Mayor's ready to make a motion.
You stirred those competitive juices.
We're feeling good.
Their taxpayers should be upset they wasted that $10,000 in that third rating.
Mr. Knutson, can we handle these two resolutions in a single motion, or should we handle them separately?
Mayor, you can handle them in one motion.
All right, we've got resolutions 2017-129 and 2017-130 authorizing the issuance and awarding the sale of $9.48 million in general obligation capital improvement plan refunding bonds, and then the providing for the payment of $1.640 million general obligation recreational revenue refunding bonds, Series 2017D. We got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I move.
Yeah,
Mr.
we talked over. Brindle seconded.
We weren't waiting for him.
Member Stewart seconded, and Member Fisher has a question or a comment.
I want to know how you two knew, you know, well, he could have changed it up. He could have done anything. You had a lot of power there for a minute.
I trust him.
Okay. So I just want to make a couple comments. One is just for folks watching at home and everything, this seems confusing sometimes, but in essence, we just it's like refinancing our mortgage, but instead of stretching it out to make our payments easy, we actually, in one case, actually condensed it a little bit, which is a great move. So we're paying less interest and less term, and it's all really great. The other thing I would just say is I learned a lot by reading those ratings reports, and you realize that the decisions we're making up here add up to something, from outside perspective. We certainly know they're important to our residents and business owners that are in the community, but when you see that long-term performance and what we're doing really makes a big difference, it was quite educational. So, thanks.
Good. Thanks, Member Fisher. Any further comment? Yeah, Member Stewart.
Yeah, everything that I read in this looked pretty normal to me. With one exception, I just need your help understanding it, which is the...
Don't say it.
He's going to say it.
Don't say it. Don't ask.
No, this...
Please don't say it with the microphone. Go ahead, I'm just teasing.
It's all fine. Which is the inability to prepay until a certain time period expires, and it seemed like an odd period of time to me. Help me understand how that is arrived at, and if it's something I don't need to worry much about.
Yeah, so Mr. Stewart, you're referring to the call date on the public offering. Because these bonds are publicly offered, that means they're underwritten by a broker-dealer who's purchasing them from the city and then reoffered to their marketplace. It could be what's called retail investors, which would be you and I and other retiree savings vehicles. It could be insurance companies, banks, the full breadth of the bond buying marketplace. And so as part of that, there's an expectation that these underwriters would be able to protect or provide some protection to their bond purchasers, that when they invest in the city of Edina's bonds, they'll actually be able to hold on to these for some period of time. And so when we go through an analysis on a public offering, we tend to look at the market and what the appropriate call date would be, and that essentially is that period of time where you're locked out of prepaying on those bonds so that those individuals can successfully bid on the city's bonds and apply an appropriate interest rate. So the date that we recommended was essentially the date where we saw that there would be no penalty to the city, meaning a higher interest expense or a higher interest bid on purchasing your bonds. And part of that calculation also is an understanding that the levy is supporting these CIP bonds, and there may not be cash that the city wants to apply towards this particular bond repayment as opposed to maybe some other capital needs of the city. And in that judgment, we felt like it wasn't worth risking a higher interest rate by shortening the period of that call date, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we've got a motion and a second. We've got completed discussion. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? Carried. Good. Mr. Anhut, keep bringing that good news to us. Yeah.
Proud to.
Thanks, Mr. Urim. All right. Resolution 2017-131, donations. We need a 4/5 vote when people are donating to the city. We've got a couple of donations that have been submitted to the city. Is there a motion regarding 2017-131 to
So
accept
moved.
those donations? We've got a motion from Member Stewart and a second from Member Brindle. Discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. These are both, in this reporting period, Park and Rec Administration, Crime Prevention Fund, $6,000 for a scholarship grant, and then the Rotary Club of Edina, $10,000, interactive musical instruments for Roslyn Park. And Member Brindle, I don't know if you want to comment on what an interactive musical instrument is that would be placed in the park, but it might be beneficial.
There is an installation at a park in Minneapolis that's right across the street from Edison High School. And these are percussion instruments. They have a mallet. And so they're tuned percussion instruments, so people can come by and they're various pieces of metal in different colors, shapes, and as they walk by, they can stand there and enjoy the sounds. Or they can just hit when they walk by and just enjoy the fact that they're not just walking through a park, but they're interacting with the park. So thank you to the Rotary Club of Edina. And I did speak with Director Catre about this earlier. The park installation in Minneapolis was organized through the City of Lakes Rotary and through Schmidt Music. So I've connected Director Catre with Doug Schmidt at Schmidt Music, and he can consult with our park department about contacts that they can make to learn more about tunable, the different percussion instruments that you can get for a donation of $10,000. So that's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the last matter in this section of the agenda is a proposed resolution establishing extended parking hours in some of the neighborhoods adjacent to the 50th and France neighborhood. And this would be in conjunction with the upcoming Market Street project, and Mr. Neuendorf has this matter. Mr. Neuendorf, welcome.
Yes, sir, thank you. The item tonight, Resolution 2017-132, does address the city's standard 6-hour limit for on-street public parking. This proposal is brought out in response to the Market Street redevelopment. That project is getting ready to start. We're out for bid. We'll expect to be opening those next week. And you'll recall one of the key schedule items for this project was to essentially fast track it so that the north ramp reconstruction and the center ramp reconstruction would overlap a little bit. While that reduced the overall pain, it makes the construction time a little bit more tense. So the good news is that we can shorten the overall construction project from 30 months down to 21 months. But after studying this for several months and talking with several different people, businesses, residents, consultants, et cetera, we've not found a singular solution to make sure that there's enough parking for employees, customers, guests, businesses, residents, et cetera. And so on both the October 17th agenda and also the November 8th agenda, there was a list of 12 different strategies that we're recommending. The idea being that if we can't find one single solution to solve everything, if we can make small adjustments to a number of different factors, if a number of different parties can be a little bit more flexible during the construction, we're going to get through this. So those strategies have been detailed in the past. We've begun to implement those. At our last council meeting, we changed the parking permit rules for next year. This evening, we have this resolution that addresses the on-street parking. In December, we'll expect another resolution in regards to parking on France Avenue. on a portion of France that is currently no parking. So that's basically the summary of it. This proposed change is temporary. It's only for the 9-month construction period, and it only affects those streets within walking distance of 50th and France. With that, I'm happy to stand for any questions and discuss further.
Questions for Mr. Neuendorf? Member Staunton?
So who do you expect to be parking on the neighborhood streets?
So this is intended for overflow parking. So it typically would be part-time employees. It could be customers. It could be full-time employees from time to time. We've already made provisions whereby the contractors are not allowed to park in the ramps. They're not allowed to park on the streets. The developer has requested, in fact, and this will be on your December agenda as well, they've requested that we allow them to use the vacant public works site. They're willing to get a shuttle bus and shuttle their workers to and from the construction site. So the people that would be parking in the neighborhoods would be some of the business employees that are already there today, as well as some of the general public. We don't expect this to be widely used, but the reason that we're asking for the extension of time is that if there is one of those unforeseen situations, major snow, if there's a funeral at the church and that lot is full early, we want to provide a safety valve for folks. So that's how we're anticipating this to work.
Is there any way to prevent the construction workers from parking on the street if there's 10-hour time limit?
In our construction contract for the north, we've identified that the contractor needs to find a parking solution. And in our contract with the developers on the south, the Edina Market Street, that's also one of the provisions is that their employees park off-site, and we've made these initial arrangements to park in that parking lot.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Member Stewart.
I'm not worried about the construction workers as much as I'm worried about the retail workers at 50th and France choosing to park in the neighborhoods and then inconveniencing really the people in the neighborhoods. I don't know what to do about that. Is it necessary that we extend these hours? Is this so you were talking about how we're trying to piece together a bunch of things, and is this a necessary piece or is this a good to have piece?
In our opinion, this is necessary and essential. Right now, a number of part-time employees, while they're not supposed to park in the ramp, they park there anyway. As the number of on-site stalls are limited, I think there's going to be more managers and more business owners urging their employees not to take up customer spaces. And I think there's a likelihood that some of those people might be parking in the streets. We'd rather have them parking in the street, which could be considered an inconvenience to neighbors, but we'd rather have that situation than customers coming to 50th and France, not finding a place to park and going home not to return for 2 years.
My concern is I don't want it to, for the people in those neighborhoods, I don't want it to feel like it's the Edina Art Festival for 6 months straight or longer.
I've heard that analogy before. We don't expect it would get anywhere to that degree. In our initial analysis of the numbers, we would anticipate that on the peak day of the peak hour of the peak day, we might have a shortage in the range of 30 cars. So maybe some of those cars might not come because they know it's busy. But during the art fair, that typically attracts well over 100,000 people over a couple-day weekend. Here we're talking maybe 30 folks. So I don't expect it to rise to that level of inconvenience.
Member Brindle.
Thank you. Has notice gone out to the residents in the area that there's going to be a change in the parking rules?
At this point, there has not, because we don't know if this, we wanted to bring it to you tonight before we reached out to them. So the neighbors that back up to or front on France Avenue have been notified of a separate request. And that is in regards to parking between 47th and 48th Street on France Avenue. we specifically reached out to those folks because in our city engineer's due diligence, he found an old memo from the early 1990s where the residents at the time specifically made a request. So in respect for that, we thought we'd reach out again to them and engage them. But typically, the reason we didn't do anything for the other neighborhoods is because we're strictly seeing this as a temporary provision. So when there's a temporary construction project, we typically don't reach out to folks and let them know that there might be a difference in the parking situation. It's kind of the ebb and flow of construction projects.
If there is someone who needs the parking place in front of their home because of a disability or some special circumstance that they need to have that spot in front of their home, that's the public engagement piece, I guess, that I'd like to make sure that is there so that they know who they can call, and we have a process that we can provide to them.
That's a really good concern, a really smart point. So this provision would not supersede any of the other parking restrictions in town. So you still can't park in front of someone's driveway, you can't block the intersection or crosswalks or fire hydrants. If there's a handicap spot, you can't block that either. But certainly if this goes through, our intention was to work with the neighbors and notify them that this change is coming. And if there are special needs, we've engaged a business liaison who's also tasked with working with the neighbors to make sure that any rough spots can get smoothed through. So we certainly do intend to reach out to the neighbors, but we want to know what we're reaching out to them about before we get into it.
Let's see here. As far as cycling, is there even a bike lane on France Avenue? I'm not even aware that there is. Maybe there's a sidewalk along parts of France.
I'm going to ask our city engineer if he recalls.
There is not a bike lane, but we've received some comments about that separate request that Bill mentioned that will come back in a couple council meetings to talk about the west side of France Avenue.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Now, if residents have questions, is this something that Pat Tucker would work on, or is she specifically working with the area businesses?
Pat Tucker has been hired to be the communications coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
So her probably primary task is working with the businesses because this construction is right in front of their doors. But certainly she's also tasked with working with the neighbors in the immediate area. So this would fall within her purview.
All right. Okay, so the discussions with the churches, is there any parking allowed in the church parking lots?
Yes. So the developers have secured a 2-year lease with Mercy Commons Covenant at 50th and Indianola. So that parking lot will be available Mondays through Fridays.
For general customers?
For 2 specific groups. We'll be issuing temporary parking permits. So there's about 50 of the stalls that we're going to issue permits to full-time employees so that they can park in that surface parking lot, which will then open up 50 stalls in the parking ramps. That parking lot will also be used temporarily for the valet parking. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, it's used by the church.
All right. Okay. Well, we got some questions and comments from Jack Rice in an email that I think I will send to you. And is there any notice requirement to proposed affected residents? Well, I think we've been around that. So I will go ahead and send his comments to you and just make sure that we consider some of that. I'm sure 49th Street is going to get its share of parking as well. So I think that's where some of his comments are centered. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Member Stewart.
Thank you. Mr. Neuendorf, does this need a resolution from the council for you to change parking rules and regs? And part of the reason I ask, it seems to me that this is one of those things that if it could be done by staff, just using their expertise, then if it's not right, you can just tweak it quickly and react quickly and get it right quickly without having to come back to council and have another council meeting to change what we decide. Maybe, Roger, maybe we need to ask you that question.
The most prudent course is with the one we're using, by having a resolution so no one can question later the staff didn't have the authority to do it. Arguably, the staff would have that authority, but this takes away any question marks.
So instead of the resolution as written, and actually I don't remember what it says, but I'd like to be sure that we empower the staff to make the decisions rather than having it specifically state that we are saying what it's going to be.
Well, except I think our existing code is a 6-hour parking limit. So we're trying to deal with that 6-hour code.
Yeah, but can we relax that by this resolution and give staff the authority to adjust it however they deem appropriate for this period of time?
I mean, we would be willing to, if you want to, if you can delegate that authority, we'd be willing to take that authority, because this is a no-win decision for council. I mean, we want the project, we've approved the project. You know, it's this element of shared sacrifice that's kind of in the air that has to happen to enable that project to happen, but it's not shared equally by everybody in the town.
Right,
so,
and but I'm seeking a solution that we can adjust it as necessary and do that in rapid order if necessary.
I think between actually 4 staff that are here, between Mr. Milner and the chief and Mr. Neuendorf and myself, I mean, Mr. Milner and his team adjust traffic, parking requirements all the time to conform to the needs of construction projects, and so that's something that we regularly do. In that case, it's more of a subtraction, usually, but that moves people around.
If my other council members are willing, I'd like to make a motion to that effect, to relax the current restrictions for the time period of the construction and empower staff to adjust those parking restrictions as appropriate. Yes, that'd be great.
And then I'll give mine too. That may or may not affect what you want to do.
I kind of thought people had done that.
Member Fisher.
So I think my thought is that we have to be really diligent on the contractor parking, and it might even involve penalties if they're found to be parking there. So when you're doing the contracts, putting it really into the contract, and that'll give the owners of those companies some incentive to make sure they're really convincing their
but we can do that
staff.
Contractually. We have different leverage with the contractors.
And then communicating this well to the neighbors. The more I thought about it, at first I was really concerned, and then I started thinking about it more in the terms that I'm hearing here, that it's sort of a partnership, that the neighbors and the businesses kind of go hand in hand. And the neighbors like to go walk and have those businesses be healthy and be there for them, and we need them to be healthy at the end of this project. And this is sort of the contribution from the surrounding neighborhood. Where it doesn't work is when they're taking on, where the burden becomes too heavy. And I think that's where we have to be nimble and sort of monitor the situation too. And I think, you sort of look at the map and you go, oh my gosh, there's going to be wall-to-wall parking on all of those streets. I don't think that's really going to be the case almost any of the time. But I think until we really do it and see how people behave and what happens, we're not going to know for sure. And I think I kind of like the idea of a little bit of nimbleness there on the part of staff to sort of make some adjustments where needed. I would say the one thing I thought about is sort of the recent project is the work at the high school and how students moved into the neighborhoods, and that was probably a much more aggressive situation and filling the streets literally. And we're unraveling a little bit of that now, and we're going to get back to a normal situation, and we will have gotten through that crunch. So I think this is a similar situation, and I think we'd be in favor of it.
Thanks. So I like what I heard about what the developer's done with Covenant Church. They got a contract with them to do valet and full-time employees over there at that facility. I think that does free up some space in one of the parking ramps. What I haven't heard anything about is Good Shepherd Church on France Avenue. I haven't heard anything about the former Grace Church down at 54th and France, where when Gene Hoagland did his project, I think that's where all the construction workers parked, and they shuttled them down. Well, that's a great place for...
currently called Calvary.
Calvary, thank you. At Calvary Church, they've got a massive parking lot in the back. I haven't heard anything about any kind of a contractual relationship being established with them. I haven't heard anything about a contractual relationship about Public Works site. I personally think France Avenue from 47th to 48th, parking on the west side of the street might work. And then just my final comment is that the 6-hour rule presently is enforced only by complaint. So I feel like in a way we got the cart ahead of the horse here. What I was hoping was that we'd see an overall plan from you, and I know the merchants are all waiting for this overall plan from you, and in that overall plan would be the parking strategy for construction workers, for people that work at 50th and France, because my general notion, I'm sure the rest of the council feels the same way, is that we want to establish a standard for how merchants, customers, employees, and neighbors in the walk shed are treated during a construction process that's going to be elongated. It's going to be protracted. There's no way around it. I mean, we need to think about this in terms of being up to 30 months. None of us want to see what happened on Nicollet Mall happen at 50th and France. But I feel like this is like a first step. I don't even know if it's the right step to take, because I haven't heard one thing about Good Shepherd Church, Calvary Church, the Public Works site, France Avenue, and the overall plan, which I think is really critical. So I really can't support this right now. I'm just not going to support it.
So your suggestion is we just defer or table this until another time after we have a more complete parking plan?
Complete plan, construction plan, construction management plan for the whole area. Now, we might not be able to do that. We might be under too much pressure with respect to all the other elements of it, but there's been some time that's gone by already, and there's been, in my mind, there's been a sufficient amount of time to cut deals with these other churches. So I don't see a need to push traffic into the neighborhood on a 10-hour basis until we know for sure whether these other churches will give us parking space and somebody can pay for it, whether it's a developer or we make us some other kind of an arrangement. So I just feel it's a touch premature.
I'm also not supportive of it. I think the 6 hours provides customers as well as part-time employees a place, and it self-polices on the construction traffic and the full-time employees. I think we should move to a valet or additional spillover parking in other lots. I think this is the wrong step at the wrong time.
Mr. Mayor, I find your logic persuasive. I think it's... So if we want to move that way, do we need to have a motion to table, or how do we do this?
Mr. Knudsen, do we need to deny the resolution or just table it? We just table it?
You can do either. You can just table it indefinitely.
Somebody want to move that?
I'd make that motion.
All right.
Second.
Any further discussion?
So can I just ask the question? It's fine to table it or whatever we're going to do to it, but then the key is to, I think, the plan, right?
Right.
So
we need a plan.
Do you have any idea when that might happen, or how this kind of, what would this action do?
Sure. So one of the biggest challenges right now is the calendar. So we're out for bid. The contract documents have already been issued. 2 addendums have been issued. So it's difficult to change the contract documents for the north ramp at this point. We can do it at the final, so we can do that in December. To my knowledge, the developer has spoken exclusively with Mercy Commons Covenant and with Good Shepherd. To my knowledge, they have not been able to strike a deal with Good Shepherd. I don't think that they have, I've not heard of them having serious conversations with Calvary or St. Pete's down on 54th. In our initial conversations with the businesses and some of the transportation advisors, they didn't feel that those would work for employees or for customers or for valet. They're just too far. So that's why they didn't look at those more explicitly. The developer, their timeline to start their project is April 1st. So that's part of the reason why some of these details are slow in coming from them, because they've got another 5.5 months in front of them. Whereas the parking permits for the 600 to 700 employees go on sale in a week. So before we can sell permits, we need to know what it is we're offering them. So that is some background information. I know it's not a precise answer, but as we move forward on the north ramp in December, we will have our construction plan for that site. The developer will have their construction plan for the south side of the street, or the center ramp, when they bring their plans forward. So we've been in near constant communication, but right now their project and our project are off by 4 months. That's just the way the schedule works.
So I think, Mr. Mayor, we'll be back with a plan that addresses more of these concerns at the next council meeting, so the 12/5 council meeting.
Yeah, and I'm sensitive to the issues that Mr. Neuendorf just raised, but personally, I do not think that Calvary Church is too great a distance for employees at 50th and France to park. As we look at ways to get through this issue together, get through this construction season that's upcoming, for 24 to 30 months, and make 50th and France an even more vibrant neighborhood. So I can see easily running a shuttle once they know all the hours for employees from Calvary Church down to 50th and France. It's 4 blocks. It's clearly in the walk shed. So let's see what we can do with them.
We will.
I would just add that I think that Member Stewart made a really good point of not specifying a length of hours, but simply relaxing the parking. But I guess that's up for you to think about. If you feel like putting a maximum in a resolution is a way to guarantee that car is going to move, that, if you would think about that a little bit, other than just relaxing the parking to say, well, if it's over 6 hours, it's because of an extenuating circumstance for over this period of time. So, so looking at that just to see if it's necessary to specify a number.
Happy to look into that further.
Right, thank you.
All right. Correspondence and petitions. Anything other than what was on the dais this evening?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, yeah.
You need to vote on the motion.
Oh, excuse me. We got a motion and a second with respect to tabling this matter indefinitely. Resolution 2017-132. Thank you, Member Stewart and Ms. Mangan. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And we are sensitive to the time involved and hope to hear from folks soon. Okay. Correspondence petitions. Anything other than what was on the dais?
No, there is not.
Manager Neal? Okay. Aviation noise update. Anything there, Member Brindle?
Not really. The meeting took place, and now particularly those on the Noise Oversight Committee for the Metropolitan Airport Commission, who are community representatives, will be getting together and talking about how the idea of increasing the number of community seats on the Noise Oversight Committee would affect that governing body.
Okay, good. Thank you. Manager Neal, anything as a follow-along? All right. Member Fisher, council comments?
None for me.
Member Stewart? I mean, Member Staunton?
Nope.
Member Brendel?
Oh, I always have a couple. I congratulate, I can't remember if our first meeting was after the election, but congratulations to those who won the school board election. And one of the school board, new school board members put out a plea to us as adults to model positive online behavior for young people with our own social media interactions. There is some cyberbullying that is kind of running rampant, and it's definitely situations that bring it on and that occur, and so it's just something to be aware of and help young people find better ways to communicate and more equitable ways to communicate. The other thing is that I would like an update on the geothermal at the Public Works site and how that's working, and
the solar, or do you mean the?
Well, there's a geothermal system with pipes, with stuff going through the pipes in the ground.
Yes.
And it was when this was early in my time as a council member, and it was innovative. Geothermal was being introduced as, I mean, it's been around a long time, but it was a very expensive thing to do.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard about it for a while, so I want to know how it's going.
All right, we'll prepare that for you for the next council meeting, if that's okay.
All right,
Thanks.
great, thanks.
All right, Member Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did not get to do council comments on November 8th because we were here at 2:30 in the morning. So I'm going to go back. October 24th, I got to speak to a group of Webelos Scouts from PAC 68 about civic engagement. It was really fun to meet with those young people. On Wednesday, the 25th of October, I went to the grand opening for a new restaurant here in Edina called Piata Mediterranean Restaurant. It's a kind of a fast, casual, but nice restaurant at the Onyx on York. Really, they had some food there for everybody who participated, and it was delicious. On Sunday, the 5th of November, several of us attended a meeting at the Senior Center on, it was called A Conversation on Race, Religion, Ethnicity, Sexual Orientation, and Gender Identity. And a speaker named Jesse Kingston, who's just a treasure here in the city of Edina, one of our residents, did a great job on a panel of high school students that are just remarkable young people. So really interesting to hear some of those viewpoints, and they will be informative coming up here on Monday, December 4th, when everybody in the community is invited to a conversation on race and equity that's going to be held at Southview Middle School from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock on Monday, December the 4th. We had a town hall meeting this last Saturday at the Edina Senior Center, which was just a really great variety of topics to talk about, and a room full of people who were interested in our community, which is great. Also, things that are coming up on November 29th, a meeting of the League of Minnesota Cities, and on the 30th, Metro Cities annual meeting. So lots going on. But I want to pause, and this Thursday, of course, is Thanksgiving. I am so thankful for so many things, but here in this role, I'm thankful to be in this community. I think Edina is a fantastic community. I'm thankful to serve with this council. I think these council members are hardworking, engaged, intelligent people. We learn a lot from working with each other, and I'm just thankful for all of you, and thankful for the staff for our city who does just a fantastic job serving this community. So thanks.
Thank you, Member Stewart. That was very generous, and a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday to you as well. Just a quick couple of things for me. I got a call yesterday from the Minnesota Housing Partnership, and they were doing a press conference this morning, wondering if I would come to that press conference. It has to deal with the federal tax bill, and if the federal tax bill passes as it's presently crafted and was passed by the House, it'll eliminate what are called private activity bonds, and private activity bonds fund in substantial part affordable housing projects around the country, and the estimate is through our own folks on our housing fund, Jeff Huggett, that it will reduce affordable housing by 1 million units, so 1 million units nationwide over the next 10 years. It'll cut affordable housing production in half. So they had a meeting or press conference. I went over to participate in that with several folks that are involved in that industry at the encouragement of Mr. Huggett. So thank you for that encouragement. A few weeks ago, I reported on attending the Summit on Entrepreneurship and how cities can embrace and encourage entrepreneurship in communities. I asked the Kauffman Foundation, which sponsored me to the event out in Oakland, California, to send me these books, the E-Ship Summit, and I've got a copy for each of you. I'll pass those down this way and that way. I got a copy for Manager Neal that I gave him this morning, and maybe at some point in time when it's convenient, we can even have a work session on promoting entrepreneurship and embracing and encouraging entrepreneurship in our community. So those are the things for me. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have just two quick things. I've had a couple of professional development opportunities this fall that I wanted to come back and report on to the council. One is my annual conference. I'm a member of the International City Management Association. Our annual conference this year was in San Antonio in October. Three pretty strong themes in our conference in my profession this year were around equity, diversity, community engagement, and law enforcement management. Those are three very strong themes, and I think they were strong themes last year as well. Rabia Sadiq, Ana Maria Chavez, and Richard Florida were the keynote speakers at the event this year. Pretty strong conference, and I learned a lot, and I appreciate the council's support to send me to that conference. The other opportunity was something called the City Managers Design Academy. This is the 6th Design Academy. It's an event that grew out of a program called the Center for Design in the City, and it came out of a program there from the Mayor's Design Academy, where the American Architectural Foundation was having a professional development opportunity for mayors to come from across the country and learn from design professionals also from across the country on projects that were individual projects for each city. They have extended that program to city managers. This is the 6th one they've done. One of the great things about the program is that it's a funded program by the foundation itself. So that was very nice. It was in Kansas City, and it was an opportunity to have our Grandview Green project sort of analyzed by some other city managers, but more important, some design professionals from across the country, from New York, Boston, Miami, Washington, D.C., Dallas, Los Angeles, and Chicago. It was a great opportunity. I learned a lot about our project, and really learned about how fundamentally I think I can improve the way that we present the project. And I think fundamentally the advice from this group is we're building a park over Highway 100, and we're funding it with economic development opportunities that get created, not the other way around. It's sell the park first and the economic development second. But we're talking about some of the other recommendations we got from that group and trying to build those into our presentations from here on out. That's all I have. Thanks.
All right, great.
Mr. Mayor, could I just add one thing? You actually brought up a good point, and I should have mentioned it. The importance of people reaching out to their congressman, to their, about this tax bill. I've been contacting all of the people that care about affordable housing, and it's particularly effective if Edina residents are reaching out, because I think there's a perception that we wouldn't care so much about that. And I will just say from real life, where I work during the day, we have a group of people that's what they do. They design affordable housing. So we probably have 600 units in our design pipeline right now, and we've already had one, possibly the second one, put on hold indefinitely, because this legislation is so harsh, it will literally change it immediately. So there are already projects, people that could be in affordable housing a year from now, that it's already being stopped just because of this conversation. So this is a dire situation for folks that need this housing. So I would just encourage anyone and everyone to call, your congressman.
Yeah, thank you, Member Fisher. That is the action step. Is in our case, call Congressman Ellison, or call, in particular, I think Congressman Paulson, who happens to be on the Ways and Means Committee, and indicated, at least in committee, that he supported the private activity bonds, didn't want to see them cut out of the bill, but nevertheless voted for the bill, which did include the removal of private activity bonds. So we need to talk to Representative Paulson about that. Okay, anything else? Otherwise, we'll adjourn the council meeting and we'll reconvene the HRA meeting. Council meeting adjourned. Call to order the meeting of the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Roll call, please, Ms. Mangan.
Excuse me. Commissioner Brindle.
Here.
Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Commissioner Staunton.
Here.
Commissioner Stewart.
Here.
Chair Havlin.
Here. We have a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening for the HRA. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and second to adopt the agenda for the HRA for the meeting of November 21, 2017. Any further discussion? Changes, additions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Community comment. Is there anyone who wishes to address the HRA? Seeing no one in the audience, we'll move on to the next portion of the agenda, which is the adoption of the consent agenda. Only one item on the consent agenda, and that's the approval of the minutes of November 8th, 2017. It was a regular HRA meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and second to approve the meeting minutes of November 8th, 2017, meeting of the regular HRA. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. So now we are going to entertain a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statutes 13D.05. The purpose is to discuss the possible purchase by the HRA of real estate, real property in the Pentagon Park location. Street addresses 4901, 4820, 4815, 4510, 4530, 4540, 4550, 4570, 4600, and 4660 West 77th Street, and 7710 Computer Avenue and 7600 Park Lawn Avenue. Is there a motion to go into closed session pursuant to MnStat 13D.05 Subdivision 3C
So
to
moved.
discuss possible purchase of this property I mentioned? We got a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. We'll go into closed session up in the community room, and we will move back into open session up in the community room and then dismiss the business of the HRA for the evening. All right. We are